While some scientists engineer shiny new consumer goods for an eager public, Harvard psychologist B.F. Skinner seeks nothing less than the engineering of human nature. In experiments with subjects as simple as pigeons, Skinner declares that with the right social engineering, we can create a new breed of human being. Skinner is firmly in the behaviorist tradition pioneered by John Watson in the 1920s. Like Watson, Skinner contends that with the right tools, we can predict and control behavior.
Well, hello folks. Yesterday I took a ride around, 37 degrees centigrade, high 90s, where I live, which is usually a very mild climate. I noticed Firenze, Florence, Italy is that hot all the time these days. So I've been lucky this summer. Anyway, it was a pleasant ride, and I was blabbering away about the AI God. And, basically I was saying that the AI God, if you want to use that metaphor, is not going to be anything like the gods that we invented thousands of years ago. The stories that we told and the things that we believed in. Now, this relates to today's video because I'm going to talk about operant conditioning, like B.F. Skinner, but in the context of game theory, which will probably put it reinforcement learning, and how those shape beliefs and how beliefs shape our actions. It all fits. So you can use these game theoretic and psychological ideas for judgment, for decision theory, for strategies in games or competitions, economics, warfare, and so on. So it's really a good critical thinking tool. Anyway, yesterday I didn't raise the question of morals and ethics. Where do those come from? How do they develop these social norms? These rules, why do we believe in them? What's their utility, if you don't mind me using that word, in society? How do they keep us from failing as a civilization or a tribe or a group or a business or whatever? They're important. I didn't bring that up. It's a big subject, and there are many contexts within which we can examine those, many angles from which and lenses we can use to examine these things. Philosophy, psychology, literature, thousands of years of this stuff. So anyway, if the tools that we have today, science, engineering, technology, mathematics, artificial intelligence, and soon artificial general intelligence, are ubiquitous, basically, but they'll become more available to people, easier to access, easier to use, easier to deploy. And at the end of the day, available to good and bad people, to smart people and stupid people, to people who are motivated in terrible ways, people who are badly incentivized. I talked about that yesterday riding around. Just people. And if we can't get our shit together in the mundane meat space of, normal life without all of these amazing, powerful tools and processes that we have today, how well do you think we're going to use them moving forward? Now, some people blame science for a lot of things. So it obviously benefits us. It also brings us into global warming, climate change, nuclear war, much more devastating kinds of warfare, more control over us by governments and bad actors. And also for most of us, like I said yesterday, these are black boxes. People don't understand them anyway. So that's kind of problematic because basically you don't even know what you have faith in. You don't even know where your beliefs came from. You have no clue. You're just kind of going along to get along, as it were. So, how are we going to manage these things? If you think we're in a democracy or you think you have some agency, some small ability to influence leaders, business leaders, communities, whatever, what are you going to do to help people understand these things? Complex systems. It's not going to be easy. So if we fail to do this, basically our civilization will fail. And what you need to know and what you need to prepare for, the only thing you need to prepare for, the most important thing, is that life is going to be much harder than it has been since World War II. We've lived a very fortunate 70 odd years, 80 years. A lot of the automobiles and air conditioners, refrigerators, home appliances, labor savers that are all fueled by fossil fuels have been around helping us, and technology, obviously, computing and so on. And yet we're just people, like I said yesterday, normal people who have biases and who are illogical. A lot of this game theory hinges upon people being rational actors. So I would imagine that Putin was probably thinking the West was rational. And if he made some certain calculated moves in the whole negotiation of warfare that happens before war becomes kinetic, that perhaps it would de-escalate, a deal would be done, and it would be over without too much damage or loss of life. I don't know. I'm not in his head. But if he's a good player, he might have thought like that. And I don't know if we have good players in the world on any side anymore. I think they're all so polluted by ideology that fact-based, science-based, evidence-based, game theoretic, good play is almost impossible. So I'm going to take you through some things. Here's some notes I have on the game theory thing. And, I'll show you on my notes so you can read along with me and I'll comment, because there's a lot there. I want to get through it quickly so that this video isn't too long. Let's go. Well, okay, let's continue. The Skinner video says it all, doesn't it? And that was a long time ago. So back in the 50s, people were thinking about this. You know it from the father of public relations. You know it from marketing gurus and everything. So basically, operant conditioning, right? Behavior that's followed by pleasant consequences is likely to be repeated, and behavior followed by unpleasant consequences is less likely to be repeated. So anyway, this kind of learning in game theory is more referred to as reinforcement learning. And in a complex dance or negotiation or whatever between two parties who are trying to benefit, it's complicated. It's back and forth. Lots of signals that are being shown and so on, but I'll get into that later. That's another video. Just keep it to this for now. So anyway, reinforcement learning, it shapes animal behavior. You know that from your pets. And we're animals. Human beings are animals. We're not, whether you believe it or not, our closest ancestors are the apes, gorillas, bonobos, chimps. It's just the way it is. There are emergent properties involved with this learning, and there are also top-down aspects to it, and discipline and other things. So, and these are all separate issues, but we'll get into later on in the series. So yeah, think of your pets, think of your kids. Reinforcement learning is a powerful thing. So how do we learn the skills necessary for survival, right? You ask advice from people who are the best at something. You go to the experts, or you go to the person at school that seems to be good at math, or the person who your little friend when you're 10 years old that can light a fire when you're going to have a bonfire. You know, he's good at it. You're going to ask him. Somehow you observed him in action and you know he's good at it. So why don't we only learn from our experiences? Well, we also learn from others through imitation and explicit instruction. We have books and many other resources and examples to follow as well. They're all around us, including TV commercials, advertising, and so on. And again, this all interrelates with other aspects like social signaling, status, all that kind of stuff. And our learning is biased because of our beliefs. This is complex as well. And it's good for us to know this stuff so that we can slow down and ask the right questions and not think that we know it all and then make bad mistakes over and over and over again, like many of our leaders today are doing. So we're prone to learn from people who are experts, prestigious, older, etc., but not just those kinds of people. We seek advice from people who know what we need, right? So we have desires, we have things we want, and things we want to achieve, things we want to get. And we learn from people who know what we need and can help us get what we need. So from childhood, we notice competency and learn to imitate adults who do things that give the desired result. We learn new words from reliable adults. And reliability trumps age. So if another kid just seems more reliable than your parents to learn from or a peer, you'll probably learn from them. So we're often unaware of why we do what we do or the role learning has played, right? So why did I do that? What did I learn that made me do that or think that? You know, what am I paying attention to? Who's talking to me? Who am I listening to? How are they motivated? All that kind of thing. So we watch other people, we learn to imitate until we innovate. So sounds kind of fun, that little turn of phrase. Learn to imitate until you innovate. Beyond the next, NEC Electronics. I used to write blurbs and stuff for an ad agency in Japan. Sometimes my language comes out like that. It's an old habit. So these all factor into our needs. So, we're trying to find people. Yeah, we learn to imitate until we innovate or stumble upon a better solution. So a lot of places when anthropologists try to delve into how Inuit make igloos or how Indian cuisine came about, or why Mexicans eat beans and onions, or why people weave this way or that way, make different kinds of baskets and whatever. And how did that come about? Trying to figure out how they got there. A lot of times people are just imitating and innovating on what they're seeing other people figure out. And then by accident, stochastically or randomly, it seems, but obviously due to various inputs, they stumble on a better solution. Then they implement that. They start building a certain way or growing a certain way, growing, food a certain way or whatever. And people watch and go, hey, his garden's doing pretty good. I'm going to imitate that guy. So when you think you're original, most likely you're parroting something that you're paying attention to. Are you innovative? Are you creative? Are you a critical thinker, a skeptic? Maybe, maybe not. That was my point yesterday, but I'm just blabbering, no notes. So we often ignore ancient processes because we want different outcomes. So what I mean by that is maybe the Hopi or the Paiute or some indigenous group in Australia know how to do something, and they've been doing it for thousands of years and it works. We take some of that from them, maybe the corn or some material thing or some process, and we say, okay, we're going to take this little bit of it and we're going to change it because we don't want what they want. We want something else. And sometimes when we do that, when we pick and choose without really understanding why they're doing it the way they're doing it, we miss aspects of what they're doing that are thousands of years old and that make a lot of sense and that we could learn something from. So when people think that, you can only learn from science, experimentation, and so on and so forth, and you can't learn from tradition, that's just ridiculous. You can learn from anything, basically. So I really get impatient with people when they go, I couldn't learn shit from an Indian, or whatever they say. It's ridiculous. Or, they don't do it like we do it in Vietnam or something like that. Yeah, they don't, but they have good reasons for doing things the way they do. So we should learn why people do things and factor that into our needs as well. So we can actually probably get more value out of our learning experience. So learning shapes behaviors and beliefs. This is a fact. So you're imitating, you're learning, your elders are telling you to do things and so on and so forth. And your beliefs are formed, but you may not necessarily know if that's the real reason or the reasons behind your belief are true or not. So they could say, eat only 3 grams of shellfish or your wife will never have a baby. And really what it's all about is the toxins in shellfish. And if you eat too much of it, it may make you less fertile or something. But you don't know that because you don't have science. But for a long time, that's been the practice, and it works for some reason. So, you may believe in a story about a taboo that actually improves your health, right? It doesn't matter if the reason is correct, only that the consequences for believing are positive. Belief motivates us to act as well, right? So before you just trash religion because it's superstitious or whatever, you have to look at how it functions and what those belief systems can accomplish. So when people do tie Christianity to the Enlightenment in some way, or say that, Newton was he was an alchemist, but he was a Christian alchemist, or, the founding fathers were, most of them were Christians or what. Well, yes, slave owners were Christians, There are good and bad things that come out of that tradition. But in general, yes, the context of Europe during, since the Middle Ages has been highly influenced by Christianity in good and bad ways, right? Mechanisms for control, divine rights of kings, selling souvenirs to the peasants, services and souvenirs to the peasants, social control, and so on. These are primitive aspects of it, but they did give rise to, or maybe not give rise to, maybe these innovations emerged from a Christian community, from a Christian milieu, if you will. So it's not necessarily a causal thing that, Christianity caused the Enlightenment, or without Christianity, you wouldn't have had the cotton gin. Or, we needed slavery so that we could innovate and build machines and we didn't need slaves anymore because we had oil. You have to be careful with correlation and causation. You have to be careful with those narratives. So taste is influenced by learning. I know this because I've traveled a lot. So I like spicy food. I used to eat spicy food when I went to Mexico, but I also went to Thailand when I was a child. I lost my fear of spice. I lost my fear of raw fish at a very young age. So the spice and the eating habits may be something that arose, that emerged out of the culture for various reasons. Maybe people live on an island, or people live in a climate where preserving food was difficult and certain spices helped to preserve food or whatever. And then taste evolved from that or emerged out of that. And people said, I love spicy food. We got to have spice. Otherwise, it's boring. Salt and pepper. No, thanks. More spice. But actually, there's something there that's good for you. There are hidden benefits. And with hidden benefits, there are also hidden risks if you don't pay attention. So the science and the tradition and all the emergent developments of the past are things that we don't want to throw away. We don't want to not pay attention to. There are always knock-on effects for beliefs, right? Sweet and sour. Why? So do you figure out scurvy? You're just like, well, we're going to drink beer because we don't have fresh water. We can store the beer, but, we're going to need some way to get vitamin C or everyone's going to get scurvy. And people figure it out. They stumble upon it. And maybe, ancient Greece didn't need to worry about that much because they had shorter voyages. And there were more islands, more places to stop and stock up and whatnot. So determining why, this is always the thing. A belief is good or bad is not straightforward and requires careful investigation. And do we want to investigate? Do you? Do you want to know why? Or do you want to assume that you know it all because you read The Economist or the New York Times, or because you're a communist, or because you're trans, or because you're an American and you watch CNN or you watch Fox, or, wherever you're getting your diet of whatnot, and you don't want to ask why, what's contributing to my taste, to my beliefs, to how I behave, because culture is what you think and what you do. It's hard to change. But once we examine our own motivations critically, we can start to become agents of change if change is required or if improvement is required. Unfortunately, change, you can't stop it, but unless you live in a dystopian nightmare where Donald tells you exactly what to do and it changes on a daily basis because DJT changes on a daily basis. So you'd go insane, right? Mommy and Daddy told me to do this today and they told me not to do it tomorrow, and I'm going insane. Rebel with a cause.
Bring me apart!
What?
You say one thing, he says another, and everybody changes back again!
That's a fine way to behave.
Well, you know who he takes after.
Oh!
So that's when people say that's just how we've always done it. You want to learn to ask why, understand the function of your preference. Yeah, I've had this conversation many times with folks, especially my religious friends. I ask them some tough questions about maybe their theology or their beliefs. And at the end of the day, it might boil down to, I don't know, but this is what me and mine have always believed. I got it from my grandfather, who gave it to my mother, who gave it to me, and it's good enough for me. And of course, if it really doesn't have any deleterious effect on them, why would I care? Why would I want to convince them to be this, that, or the other thing? But we proselytize all the time. We think we know the truth, and it's better for everybody if they know our truth, and so on. So we tend to go hard, but again, learn to ask why, understand the function of your preference. If you can, if you want, and a lot of people just don't want to do that. So it takes time for things to be unlearned. And unlearning something can be uncomfortable and difficult. We have cognitive dissonance for this and other things, psychological mechanisms to make it easy for us to stick with what we think we know, to not change. Basically, change can be stressful. And unlearning a bad habit, anybody who plays golf knows that, or does any sport. If you have a bad habit, you need a coach, somebody who can really help you change that bad habit. It's not easy. So generalizing learning versus beliefs and tastes and all that kind of stuff. So RL, reinforcement learning, and game theory are distinct but closely related fields within artificial intelligence and decision making. While they have different focuses and methodologies, they address complex problems involving interactions and strategic decision making. So in complex systems where people are trying to achieve certain outcomes, strategy is important. And it's also complex because information is not always transparent. And there's stochasticism or randomness built into it. And, all of these things. But anyway, as we move through in this series, we'll cover all that stuff. So reinforcement learning, what is that? Reinforcement learning is a machine learning paradigm that involves training an agent to make sequential decisions in an environment to maximize a cumulative reward over time. So again, when we're talking about training large language models or something like that, this is a different application of things, but it's still searching for those outcomes, for those desires, those goals. And it's responding to data, to information that's coming in and turning left, turning right, switch on, switch off based on its experience and what it has, in front of it or in it. So the agent, and that could be you, it could be Biden, it could be his advisors, it could be your manager, learns by interacting with the environment and receiving feedback through rewards and penalties based on its actions. There we have our incentives, we have motivated reasoning, which we'll get to later, incentives, and so on. And these feedbacks are very complex and they're on the fly. So it's not as simple as saying, I live on the island of Tarawa or whatever island, Papeete, before tourism, and we know what to do here to survive and have a good culture and a happy life. Life in our civilization is much more complex than that. So RL aims to find an optimal policy, the strategy or sequence of activities that maximizes the expected long-term reward. Well, yeah, it in certain contexts and for certain machines and certain things in society and whatever, you're going to want long-term solutions. But in our world, it's pretty short-term. It's quarterly. It's profits first. And that really is the base crux motivator of everything. So when you understand that, you see how things can get twisted and bastardized pretty quick. And then you're not playing the game very well anymore. And you're not necessarily the best kind of rational actor because you're only operating, you're only motivated by certain feedbacks with primarily, how much profit and what do you have to do to get that. So here are some key components to RL. So agent, that could be anybody who's an actor, a player. The decision maker or learner that interacts with the environment, okay, the external system with which the agent interacts and receives feedback. Right now we're getting a lot of feedback from the climate and the weather. We're getting feedback from a lot of things. The economy, all these BS culture wars, and a lot of distracting stuff that's kind of systematically making us behave in a certain way, but that's a different question and very huge. But environments are complex, right? Ecosystems, the ocean, in various areas in the ocean, the Arctic. It's not like a machine that's reducible that you can take apart and rebuild, copy and put back together, reverse engineer. These are complex systems with emergent qualities that are random in many ways. So state representing the environment's current condition or configuration. So we have a state, okay? Yeah, what state is it in at the moment? Action, a decision or choice made by the agent to influence the environment. Cut down all the trees, plant corn. Reward, scholar value quantifying an action immediate benefit or cost. So again, immediate. One thing leads to another. It's not just that somebody woke up one morning and decided to invade, wherever, invade Oklahoma City or whatever. Policy, a mapping from states to actions that define the agent's behavior. So it all comes back around. Now you have a policy. This is a map from various states and it goes into more actions, and pretty soon your whole system is manned by clerks from Yale who see the world in a very specific way and don't necessarily have your interests at heart. So that's the learning aspect. So again, game theory, I did a couple videos on that, but we'll do that to put it in this context. So game theory is a branch of mathematics and economics that studies strategic interactions between rational decision makers. This is an important point. We assume they're rational decision makers, and this is one of the problems with economic theory. There's a million problems with it that are connected to finite resources and energy, but this is another huge one. So it provides a framework for analyzing solutions in which the outcome of one player's decision depends on the findings of another. Game theory aims to understand the strategic choices made by the players and predict the likely consequences of interactions. So in the big picture, what players actually are consequential, they're going to make decisions that are going to impact everybody, everything. Or they're playing for the biggest stakes. It's not you. Although for us, just survival is big stakes, paying the rent, taking care of the family. And these are huge stakes. But we're downstream or lower on the pyramid than the real players. So I always refer to players, so capital P. So critical concepts in game theory include players, participants in strategic interaction, blah, 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 strategies, payoffs, and I'll get to all this stuff every time we go into another aspect of it. Rewards associated with different combinations, and the Nash equilibrium, which I talked about on another video. A stable state in which no player has an incentive to unilaterally deviate from their chosen strategy, given the strategies of others. So you can check out that other video about Nash, but you can look it up because there's tons and tons of info on this stuff. So reinforcement learning applies to game theory settings to model and solve complex decision-making scenarios involving multiple interacting agents. So you can sense intuitively the complexity here. And you're trying to read people's minds. I'll get back into that in another video. So in these cases, each agent employs RL techniques to learn its optimal strategy while accounting for the strategies of other agents, known as multi-agent reinforcement learning. Marl. I'm going to name my son Marl, based on multi-agent reinforcement learning. And he's going to be able to sell shit to the sewer. Anyway, yeah, so you can imagine, this is, multi-agent reinforcement learning. And you think of marketing, you think of PR, you think of all that, manufacturing consent and on and on. All those people who studied and learned how to do that in order to manipulate us, the free market, into doing things that they want us to do so that they make money. They, shareholders, you and me, business executives who have huge compensation packages. It's all about that, people. It's the economy, stupid, and economics is a mess in our world. And we're going to learn that the hard way, because circumstances is the meanest dictator in the universe. And we will learn from our circumstances And maybe we'll do better next time. I don't know. So Marl, hi Marl, how you doing today? Enables exploring strategic interactions, cooperation, and competition between agents. Researchers use multi-agent Q learning, policy gradient methods, and deep reinforcement learning to tackle game theoretic problems. Applications of RL, reinforcement learning, in game theory include resource allocation, negotiation, pricing, and other scenarios involving strategic decision-making. So yeah, think about it. How many resources do you have to allocate to something, to some project? And negotiation. Who are you negotiating with? What are their motives? So in further videos, we'll talk about all that. Pricing is complex. It's not just about how much money you're going to get for something, but that's another story. And all of these scenarios involve decision-making. On the fly, moment by moment, you're trying to do it based on good information and trying to make good decisions. In summary, reinforcement learning and game theory are intertwined fields that offer complementary approaches to understanding and solving complex decision-making problems. RL provides a framework for learning optimal strategies in dynamic environments. Is war dynamic? What do you think? At the same time, game theory analyzes strategic interactions among rational decision makers. These approaches can yield insights into intricate scenarios where multiple agents interact strategically. I would say, please prove to me you're a rational actor. I want to know. A long time ago, 10 years or something, they were talking about, are the Iranian leaders rational actors? Well, they are, but they're rational within their context, and they're assuming we're rational like they're rational. And what they don't understand about Americans is that they're only rational in terms of what they want to achieve, period. Their rules. So my way or the highway. And we're going to assume you're rational if you obey. And we're going to assume you're irrational if you don't obey. So it's like witch burning, witch hunting, or it's like I'm trying to gaslight you so much that you go insane. And then I say, see, you're insane. You're not a rational actor. I can't play fair with you, so I'm going to kill you or bomb you or put sanctions on you and yours and try to strong-arm you into something. Now, it's much better if we assume we're rational actors and try to understand each side's rationale for things, reasons, justifications. And this is what good diplomacy is about, good leadership is about. But of course, we live in a world where all that matters is profits first. So forget about those things. That's what I was trying to say yesterday in my video when I was riding my bicycle. So reinforcement learning is a subfield of machine learning. And artificial intelligence that focuses on developing algorithms and models that enable agents to learn how to make decisions and take actions in an environment to maximize a cumulative reward over time. In other words, RL is concerned with teaching an agent to learn from its interactions with an environment by trial and error. So you can learn, but again, if you're not asking why or what's behind what you're learning, you're not going to know why the food is good for you after all, or why not eating this will make you more fertile or something like that. So here I have again these critical concepts, and I'll leave that to another time because it's 30 minutes, but I'll put this in the notes. This explains value function and Q value and this thing that was at the top here. Yeah, so things that you might not understand at first glance, like I put in my other video on this. Yeah, Q learning, a model free algorithm that learns an optimal action value function by iterative updating. So I talked about that before. If you want to look into that, you can grab these things and you can research each one of them separately on your own. using search engine or chat GDP or books or whatever. But it's a component of the whole thing that I think is important. So let's just do this before I conclude. Applications of reinforcement learning: game playing, so video games, face-to-face interaction games, robotics, so that they can do complex tasks, automation, autonomous vehicles, you need to have that, finance, algorithmic trading and portfolio optimization, healthcare, treatment plans, and so on. I mentioned those before. So challenges, exploring problems, balancing exploration and exploitation is challenging, especially in large state spaces. Credit assignment, determining which actions contribute to a reward can be difficult in environments with delayed rewards. Sample efficacy, stability and convergence, and so on. I'll put this in the description of the video, but take your time and understand reinforcement learning and operant conditioning. And there are a lot of spin-offs on this that you can go crazy on for days learning about. But to sum up, what I want you to do is question your learning. Why you learned the way you learned, what you learned, how it affects your behavior and beliefs, and all of those things. And really look into it and examine it. And maybe you'll find that there's room for improvement or new things you can explore, or new things you can learn. And maybe you'll develop some epistemic humility. Maybe it'll open some doors to some new domains to explore, or shed light on problems you're having or mistakes that you're making, and so on and so forth. All right, so that's the first in this series on game theory for critical thinkers. Thank you for listening. Bulliam T. out.